Hi, my name is Toolz. Welcome to an Accelerate special on farming. We are very excited and privileged to have Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje here to talk about his directorial debut, Farming. You would remember him, you should remember him from Oz, from Born Identity, from Lost, and many other amazing projects. So stick around, we're gonna have a chat with him now. Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine, thank you. So obviously we're here to talk about your movie Farming, and I hear that this is something that you started working on quite a few years back, like about 10, 15 years?
About that time, yeah, 15 approximately.
So why did it take 15 years to put everything together?
I mean, there's a number of reasons. I hadn't written, I never trained to be a writer or a director. So I had to learn those skills, I wrote it as a manuscript originally, and then I adapted it to a screenplay once I learned how to do that. And then, I went to Sundance, which is Robert Redford's institute, where it really helps you workshop projects. And so I adapted the screenplay in Robert Redford's Sundance Institute, and was awarded the Annenberg Award there that year. Thank you. But there was still a question, well, we have this award-winning screenplay, who's going to direct it? And I was like, well, I am. But as a first-time, filmmaker, I had to prove that I had the ability to direct. So then I had to self-finance my own a short film, and present that when I was pitching it. So that no longer became an issue. So all of that took time. And I think also, this wasn't the time of diversity that we're living in.
Right.
Actors didn't readily make transitions to become directors, and certainly black actors, it was very rare. So there were lots of hoops to jump through, and it was a very ambitious project. It's a period drama, scaling 3 decades, and so it's a large budget for a first-time director. And I think the nature of the subject matter, which is, it was a searingly honest look at Britain through black eyes. I'm not sure the world was ready for it then. So things have all shifted, and I think the film, arrived in its right time.
Why such a deeply personal story as like your first, the first project that you directed? Why such a, because there's so many different stories out there, but this is something that is obviously very, very personal, very, would have required you to be, quite vulnerable, and, at certain points. So why did you decide to do this and not another story?
Well, I have a plethora of stories that I want to tell, but Farming had to be the first. It's a very personal journey, and I think it gives me an identity, not only as a human being, but also as a filmmaker. And, it's the truth ultimately will set you free. And I think that's what Farming was for me. It was very cathartic initially. So that's why it had to be the first, and it was the first thing that I started writing, it speaks to the core of who I was as a human being, what I'd experienced growing up under the practice that was called farming. It was just the first thing I started to write, and I wanted to complete it, and so I have done that now, and I'm ready to go on to look at those other projects that I've been kind of keeping in the wing.
What's very interesting, we were just speaking about this before we started the interview, is I'm starting to think I was kind of farmed as well, because when I was younger, I actually grew up with a white family in Bournemouth.
Oh, in Bournemouth.
But I didn't call it farming. So where did the term come from?
The term was what I actually heard the social workers say when they came to visit my foster mother, because every now and then they would come around the house to inspect us to see whether we were being treated right, and vice versa. So I heard a social worker say it, so it became a term that was used by British social workers to describe the practice of Nigerians coming over to Britain in the 60s, throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s, whereby they would foster or farm their children out to white working class families. And this is thousands and thousands of Nigerian children all over the country. Like you said, you were in Bournemouth. I was in the southeast. Tilbury, Essex, and you'll find, and what's actually happened as I was in production with the film, there was this outpouring of people reaching out to me saying, hey, I was farmed here, and so in order to honor some of those experiences, I included it in the movie at the end. But yeah, it was very prevalent, and the idea was that, once our parents had worked and studied, they would then collect their children and return back home to Nigeria. That was the plan, and that's what social workers used to term it.
I think it's one movie, but there seem to be about 2 or 3 different stories within the movie. I haven't seen it yet because it's not out yet. But my friend, it's so weird, one of my good friends has seen it, and I literally called her and just said, tell me about it, tell me what you thought. So there's a story of you, I think you went there when you were quite young, 6 weeks?
6 weeks old.
6 weeks old.
Yeah.
So there's that story, living with a family that wasn't your, should I say, birth family.
Yeah.
There's that story, and then there's also the story of you growing up as a young black man and being exposed to so many different things, within your environment. So when were you conscious of the fact that you were black?
Oh, man. I mean, so as you said, at 6 weeks old, I was given to a white family, and it's basically nurture over nature when you grow up with a white family. And this was Tilbury, Essex in the 60s and 70s. We were the first black children there. There were no other black children. And they had no exposure to African children whatsoever. So it was a learning curve on both sides. But when you grow up with that in your environment, that's all you know.
That's all you know, yeah.
And so they were my parents, Other than the actual other Nigerian children that were in the house, that's all we knew. And we all felt the same. Yeah. This is mummy and daddy. Now, there were other parents coming to visit their children, but still, we just felt like, oh, that must be Auntie somebody, but this is mummy and daddy. And they would always tell us as well, whenever people say nasty things about you, don't just ignore them, you're the same as us. But every day we went out, we would be convinced and told that we weren't, and we would get attacked racially, bricks thrown at us, dogs set upon us, even police abusing us, and even in the house, it was common at the time in Britain for, TV shows on the BBC like Alf Garnett, Love Thy Neighbour, Jim Davison the comedian, to be using racial slurs and epithets. So common vernacular of the day.
Gollywogs and everything.
Gollywogs, coons, Sambo. Yeah. You could hear it on the TV. So when you get
you were constantly reminded that you were different.
Yeah, reminder, and not even different in a positive way. When you get constantly a negative impression of who you are, both in the home and out, it becomes a breeding ground for your own self-hatred. But so I always felt that I was like them, but every time I went out, I was told I wasn't. And so it was probably the biggest turning point was when my Nigerian parents turned up and took us to Nigeria when we was 8, and thrust us into our Nigerian culture. And it was a huge culture shock because I was just a little English boy. So the heat, the food, the language, it was just foreign to me. And I recoiled within myself so much so that I didn't speak. And they sent me back, to the family, the foster family, because I couldn't integrate.
Okay. So they sent you back because you didn't.
Yeah, because I didn't. I just couldn't. Well. Okay. I couldn't assimilate. It was just too much of a shock for me at 8 years old. So they sent me back, and that was the first time going back that I realized that my parents were white. Yeah. Because I had a reference point. I'd been to Africa. I'd seen and I was like, oh, so they're different from us, and that's really when it landed on me.
Did you feel loved when you're with your foster family? Did you feel loved?
No, I felt taken care of in that I had a roof and I had a bed, but I felt there were too many children, and everybody is vying for the attention of the one mother. And when you've got 8 or 9 kids doing that, you kind of, I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel wanted. I felt like it was kind of survival. Yeah. And they did their best, but the best, if I'm honest with you, I never had a cuddle or anything like that growing up. It just wasn't part of our makeup. It was just survival. You get up and you go out. But there were so many kids there vying for that love and attention. and there was such a constant churn of traffic. There was always kids coming through and leaving, and so you could never form lasting bonds.
Yeah.
So it made you kind of, retreat into yourself. So I used to spend most of my childhood
behind
the sofa, where I could get some peace.
Yeah. So do you feel that you, because of the way things were, do you feel you missed out on a lot? Do you think it would have been better if your birth parents hadn't given you to them?
You know what? I can't go back in time, but I think the film that I made begs the question, is what they were searching for worth what they were giving up?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important question, because what is it that we're searching for? Ambition, education, a foothold within the economic strata over love. You got to weigh it up. And I think even if you have all of those accomplishments and you have no love, there's an imbalance. Whereas when you have love, you can conquer anything.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I felt that it did impact me, very, very much, especially once I came out of that environment and I started to see people that had love, that had been, they weren't rich or anything, they were in poverty, but that had that intimate, it was a very different dynamic.
I'm getting emotional.
I'm just telling you this. But you can tell
Yeah.
people that have had the love and nurturing,
Yeah.
and you can see people that have a lack of it.
Yeah.
And so I started to see that once I came out of that environment and realized, well, that was not normal.
Yeah.
That was a traumatic experience.
Yes.
And so you have to start to learn to love yourself.
Yeah. That's actually the next question. But seriously, I'm getting emotional. I think it's because I'm still a relatively new mom. So I literally just cannot imagine life without my son. It's crazy. So let's talk more about the...
How old is your son?
He's 10 months.
10 months.
Yeah.
So take it back to 6 weeks.
No.
How would it feel?
No, I would. Whoever was if somebody was trying to take him away, I'd probably just bite their arm off. It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. So let's talk more about you realizing that you were different, and then there's the whole realization that you were different, that you were black, and your foster family were white. But when did you actually start because there's a lot of self-hatred. There's a story of self-hatred in this movie as well. So when did you actually start hating your skin color, hating the fact that you were black?
Well, I mean, it started from the early years, because you, as I've said, you're surrounded by a constant barrage of negativity. There were no positive black role models saying you're black and you're beautiful and things like that. You had to try to figure it out yourself. And so when that was constant, both in school and figures of authority as well, you started to feel that there was something wrong with you and that you wanted that to go away. And, it was also the source of many attacks. I'd get attacked just trying to get to school. And
do you remember the first time that you were attacked for being black?
I do. And it was from a policeman, actually.
Oh, wow.
I was going to primary school. And the primary school was about 5 minutes from our house. And I'd walk to school just like all the other children. Some of the children would go with their parents. It was an autumn day. I remember the leaves crunching under my feet and the sun coming through the trees. It was a very clear, image for me. And there was a police car on the side of the road, I think maybe just making sure the children were all right going to school. And he beckoned me over, and I went over, and he spat in my face.
Oh my God.
And then he drove off. And I didn't know what happened. I just looked around to see if anybody saw, and everybody carried on. They was just walking. And I looked at the sun was still there. I looked at the leaves, everything was there, and I just felt the heat of the saliva going down my face.
Gosh.
And I didn't know, I just had to wipe it off and carry on going to school. And I just, that was a policeman.
That's horrible.
But that was the reality of that day. So I'm just telling you, when you get that and you ask me, well, how, so that makes you realize that, you're not like, and if I could stop this.
Yeah, there's, in the trailer, there's a scene where you're trying
you want to wash.
Yeah, the black off your skin and everything. So when did you first encounter the skinhead, gang?
Well, they used to go to my secondary school. Some of them were sixth formers, and they were finished school. But they would loiter outside, and they would also hijack the school bus that we would, carried us to school. And I was about 13 when I first encountered them. I mean, my first impression was even earlier than that, because one of the foster children, a girl, she was the oldest one. I remember I was about 7, and I remember her coming in the house crying with her face all bloody and saying I didn't do anything, and she'd been attacked by skinheads. So I remember as a 7-year-old fearing, but it wasn't until I was like 13 myself that I encountered them, and I was brutally attacked by them, and it went on for a series of couple of weeks. And I remember going, crying to my father, and he was a lorry driver who was not around much because he was a long distance lorry driver, so it took him away 2 or 3 days at a time. And he just said to me, listen, if you go out there and fight them, or I'll give you a beating, that's it. And he put me outside the door and said, pick up a brick and go and hit them. And I had, and he didn't come with me, but I had to go and fight 2 or 3 of them at the same time. And I wasn't even a fighter like that. I was a sensitive child. But a part of me died that day, and I had to pick up a stick and do my best. And what happened is I began to get a reputation as somebody who could take a beating and give one back. Yeah. And for the first time, I was being noticed for something other than my skin color. And that was like a lifeline to me. And I was like, right, I want that.
And you were happy about that?
Well, yeah, because it was a lifeline. It sort of gave me a bit of a reputation and allowed me to sort of walk a bit freer without people always looking at my skin, because they were suddenly scared and respected you. So that made me an asset within that gang, to be honest. And but I never was accepted. That was
actually going to be my next question, because again, like, I haven't seen the full movie, but in the trailer there's a part where you're kind of not in the gang, but then they call you Pet.
Well, that's the initiation. That's the beginning. What you see there, and the dynamic between me and the skinheads when I did, roll with them, it was that one of just, they utilized me as somebody who could fight when fighting rival gangs. So
you were just like the muscle?
Well, they were all muscle.
Okay.
I was just muscle that they couldn't beat, and was useful. And so, but I was always made aware exactly what I was. Whenever they'd see their other white friends, they would quickly repudiate any connection with me.
This is hard.
And you never knew whether the attack was going to come from within the gang or from an opposing one. So it was very nerve-wracking. But again, I say this, it gave me a sense of reputation. Yeah. It allowed the other Nigerian children to be able to walk to school freely without abuse because of the reputation I was earning. Yeah. But I never felt at any chance, at any point, that I belonged, because they made it clear. But it was an uneasy kind of alliance that I had with them. Do you know what I mean?
So I'm sure you've seen the movie several times. What was the hardest scene to watch?
Hardest scene to watch. Probably where Damson Idris, the wonderful actor who plays the teenage version of myself, comes to a point where all of the cultural identity issues that he's facing and the racism sort of like are seemingly unsurmountable, and he wants to take his own life. Right. And I had to impart to Damson what that meant for me at that time, that death was not death, it was freedom, because it was the only way I could see, if I could stop the hurt and the pain, I could be free. Yeah. And so once I imparted that to him, we got the scene. But I had to relive that moment.
It must have been horrible.
It was. We both had a very bonding experience, but it got what we needed to get on screen. But for me to have to relive all of these moments was, emotionally very challenging. Yeah. But it's par for the course when you're doing a biography. Yeah.
The whole experience seems to have been emotionally, mentally challenging, draining. So we've got to wrap things up, but I've just got one more question. How were you able to reconcile with yourself as a black man? How did you get to the point where you're like, you know what, this isn't right. I shouldn't be doing this. I need to love myself. I need to love the skin that I'm in. How did you get to that point?
There were 2 points that really were pivotal in my life. The first one was the passing on my first exam, because up until and it wasn't a major one. I think it was because when I came out of Tilbury, my parents took me out of there, my Nigerian parents, once I'd things have escalated and they realized I was on the down spiral. They took me out there. I hadn't passed any of my exams at school, and they had to really put a structure around me to study. And up until that point, I was always told within Tilbury in that world that I was inferior, I was stupid, and I'd amount to nothing. And with the right kind of structure around me, and it was very difficult, but by applying myself and focusing, I passed my first exam, and I only got, I think, a C, but I never thought I could do that.
Yeah.
And that became like the blueprint for my life, that if I apply myself with dedication and focus, I can actually do something. And that's really the template that I've used for all of my success. So that was a huge turning point for me.
Yeah.
And then also I started to come to Nigeria on my own terms. You know, I'd met a few Nigerians in London of my own age who moved back here. And so I came back and I had some friends, and I could look at Nigeria without it being forced upon me, on my own terms, find my own kind of clique, understand my culture for myself. That really helped me a lot to not only embracing my culture, but who I was and loving myself.
Understanding who you were and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. One last one. So just to round up, I do understand that your foster parents passed on. Really sorry about that. Do you speak to your Nigerian parents? Do you have a good relationship?
Yeah, we speak, of course, but you know, obviously the film documents the period of my life from birth to 16. Obviously that's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so time is a great healer. And that's what it did. It allowed us to sort of bridge that gap. But, you know, I'll be honest, it's not the traditional father, mother, son relationship, because it is somewhat estranged because of the way that we were raised. You know, my formative years were with my foster parents, without them. But yeah, I mean, given that, we have a realistic relationship, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime.
I wish you the very, very best with this movie, and I can't wait to see it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
A huge shout out to Toolz for holding it down on that very special interview. I definitely felt all the emotions. But hey, on to the lighter side of things. The rains are away and Accelerate is out to play. I'm coming to you from the one center that brings us access to the biggest movies from around the world. I'm talking about the Film House IMAX Cinemas in Lekki, right from the city of Lagos. And today we're here at the African premiere of Farming by the man himself, Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje. And today on the carpet, we're going to be speaking to him and a bunch of friends and family of the Accelerate brand. Make sure you stay locked because I'm bringing you all the insights. My name is Biodun. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to be honest with you. Before I saw the trailer for this movie, the concept of farming never really registered. How familiar are you with that whole movement?
Zero. I was completely unaware that that happened.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen him on talk shows in the US and him talking about the film in Toronto and Edinburgh and places like that. The idea of it is foreign to me. But then I started to think of, not because I'm kind of nerdy, like thinking about like, you know, like the gold rush generation in England and trying to remember like how like new immigrants came to the UK and like any immigrants in a new society, it's a period of like trying to like just get accustomed and acculturated into that system. So this was the struggle back then, and he was the first generation that actually went through that. So I had no knowledge about it. I'm completely new to it, and I was as surprised as you were.
Now let's talk about the movie Farming. First of all, the man himself, Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje. I'm sure you've seen a bunch of his work. Which of them are you a huge fan of?
So
All of them. Long story short. There was Born Identity, there was Lost, there was Oz, there was Suicide Squad.
Oz, thank you. That's it. Thank you. Also, his work on Suicide Squad was really good.
Yeah,
really good.
But
Oz is, but he's really, I mean, he's amazing since I was a kid.
Definitely.
He's one of those actors that have always been on TV and we're like, do you know he's a Nigerian? Do you know?
I'm guessing we all had that same reaction.
Yeah, he
once
was
we
like
saw him.
almost like the first ever like Nigerian
that we could connect
connect with from
definitely,
Hollywood.
Definitely.
You know, so
from seeing him on screen in Born Identity, I was just like, I'm on TV.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
my parents.
yeah.
But yeah, super. All right, super. So tell me, what do you know of the concept of farming?
I mean, I heard it was about a Nigerian boy who got sent to Britain when he was really, really young and then eventually became the leader of a skinhead group, which is, I mean, the most unlikely situation you could ever think of in your entire life. So this storyline sounds absolutely amazing and I'm really, really intrigued to see this.
Super. What are your expectations of the performances of, like, I mean, look at the names on screen. Kate Beckinsale, Genevieve Nnaji, and Damson himself. What do you think that chemistry is going to look like on screen?
Oh, of course it's going to be amazing. I mean, like you said, Genevieve is in it. And I know Genevieve right now, she just sits back and relaxes unless it's a very, very good production. And then she's like, I'm going to put my name on that. So of course it's going to be amazing.
Now, I'm sure you saw the trailer for the movie Farming. What were your reactions to that?
Look, so first of all, Wale Agbaje,
Yeah.
any serious, forward-thinking Nigerian or even black skin actor will recognize talent. Would for me, I've been following his career and from afar, he's actually a mentor. And I just love the fact that he's put this out there, and the story is so crucial. We keep talking about telling our own stories, And whenever people talk about telling our stories, they're really thinking African mythology, and all these other things. But this is our story. It's an experience that people of black skin have faced, have gone through, and I think it's a story that needs to be told. It will bring a unique perspective to things.
Now, tell me, Farming, what do you know about the man himself, Akinnuoye Agbaje?
So I know he's like absolutely amazing. I was looking into the synopsis of the movie, and it's definitely a topic that hasn't been touched on, especially like when it comes to black British people. So I'm interested.
We have Genevieve, Kate Beckinsale, Akinnuoye, and Damson Idris on screen together. What do you think that chemistry is going to look like?
Amazing. Like, that's just so A-list. I can only imagine. I'm just excited to see the movie.
I can just imagine what it's like for someone who's got a story to tell and waiting that long to tell it. Must be literally like lifting, like Atlas carrying the world on your back, and you finally get to just let it go, right? It's like an artist who's got a piece. I'm working with an artist now, album's ready, she wants it out next week. I'm like, no, take time. She's like, no, I can't focus on my school because I need it to be out. So I understand that, and like for him, congratulations, because I look forward to seeing what comes next, right?
This is a very strong merging of Hollywood, the UK film industry, and Nollywood as well. What do you think? What is that narrative speaking about right now?
Well, so first of all, it talks about the fact that good things come out of Africa. Genevieve is full Nigerian. Wale is full, forget the accent, Wale is full Nigerian, right? So he's showing the world that good things can come out of Nigeria, good things come out of Africa. And it's people like this that tell the story that we want to tell. Too often, the Western world, not that they're bad, but the Western world tells a story about Nigeria and Africa. It's not exactly positive. So people like this are changing the narrative or helping change the narrative, and I love it. And I can't wait to see how he does it and what he does, and I want the world to know. It's fantastic.
People, we're here with the man of the hour. All through the night, people have been referring to him as Triple A, but hey, this is Mr. Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. It's feel so blessed to be home, and also to be home with my special project. So I couldn't be happier.
Super happy to hear about it. Now, how has your time been back? Has it been for you? I don't know the last time you were here, but definitely, like, has it been just seeing people again, just being back in the motherland?
Well, to be quite honest, on this trip, it's been purely business. So I haven't seen as many friends and family as I would normally. But anytime I touch on home soil, it's refreshing, and it's wonderful to be back.
Love it.
But as I said, the occasion is added speciality because we're bringing a Nigerian project, back home for the Nigerian audience. You
Love
know?
it. So now let's jump right into it. What was the creative process for this? What was that like for you?
Well, you know, this is a project that I've lived with for more than 10 years, 15 years
Yes,
approximately. And, you know, from start to finish, I started writing it when I was unable to actually sleep at night. And then what I did was I adapted what material I wrote into a screenplay and, you know, and just workshopped it until I had a refined script. And having seen that, I realized that I wanted to make it into a feature, but, you know, I hadn't directed before. So I had to convince people that I was the man to do it, you know what I mean? So I went out and financed my own short movie, which I shot, and that proved to people that I had the ability to direct. Then it just took, you know, 10 to 12 years to actually raise the money, but we say in industry, a film always finds its right time, and I believe this is the right time for
Ain't no better time than now. And I have to ask you, were there any hesitations whatsoever in the process of this song?
No, I mean, you know, like when you're writing a biography, you know, obviously you're going to reveal things that might not necessarily be, you know, they might be a little uncomfortable, make you a little vulnerable, but I'm a firm believer in that the truth will set you free. And, you know, there were struggles within me at times. Oh, do I really want to depict this part of my life or that? But I think the ends justified the means, because my story, although it's a personal story, is the voice of a forgotten generation in Britain, and it's a very important part of British history as well as Nigerian. So all of those things kind of drove me beyond my own emotional feelings, you know.
All right. So as we wrap up, is there anything you want to say to anybody who's watching this right now?
Just that, you know, as I've said, this story, you know, is a landmark in terms of it being illuminating an important part of British history, and as well as Nigerian history. And it also enabled me as a filmmaker to combine both Hollywood with Nollywood. You know, I got to cast the wonderful Genevieve Nanji in a starring role, and I used some wonderful filmmakers behind the set from Nigeria. So, you know, come out and support, you know, Nigerian subject matter, Nigerian stars and Nigerian filmmakers, because you're going to be what I call edutained. You'll be educated and entertained at the same time.
Love it, and that's our ethos at Accelerate. Thank you so much, sir. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you very much, man.
Yes, sir.